Stephen is most of the time, well, not at the moment, but he's most of the time based in Washington, D.C., and he is an activist and lobbyist for the disclosure of the ET presence on Earth. Initially, I had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but when I realized that it was going to be 30 minutes, I said, okay, nobody has come here to listen to me, so I think I'll just give the word to Stephen, and he can present his work. Yeah, welcome.
Well, I'll present for Frederick. How about that? Frederick is doing a wonderful job creating a presence for exopolitics in Denmark, and I know that he would love support. People have some web skills or interest in the content to help out. You can get in touch with him, and because our good friend Robert Fleischer in Germany is building an exopolitical empire down there, and he may be trying to take over the rest of Europe soon. So we need to build up the exopolitical strength in Denmark. But it's growing very quickly. So much thanks to Frederick for hosting me for this. Thanks to you for taking your time to come this evening and partake of this presentation in English, my one and only language. Thank you for that. This little gathering here is very symbolic. Some of you may be Christians, the Christian faith. The era of the Christianity, which started, of course, with the life of Christ, was in much respects a political activist movement that was an attempt to blunt the agenda of the Roman Empire and the lifestyle that was being generated there. There were very different tenets in that faith, not only from the rule of the Romans, but also the Old Testament Jewish faith, which was a bit hard, to say the least. And in order to accomplish what it set out to do, people spread out around the world and they met in little groups, 10, 20 in little homes, somewhere, and they also met in caves. They met in the catacombs underneath Rome. Private, because obviously it was considered a little off to believe in something like that then, to have a different point of view about that. The similarities are quite stark. Since 1947, groups like this have been meeting in libraries, basements of somebody's house, small meeting rooms, trying to address this issue, because the state wouldn't. And again, very similar to what happened 2,000 years ago. Now we all know that eventually Christianity changed the face of the world, particularly in the West, completely transformed the Roman Empire, and brought a very different world, I think a better world in a lot of respects. Not perfect. It took a long time. It took about 1,000 years. We don't have 1,000 years, but those were different times. Now, they didn't have the internet, we do. So what took 1,000 years then, now takes basically a year, 2 years tops. So this is important for me, to talk in groups like this. I really enjoy it. The day will come when this information will be presented to thousands of people at a time. That day is very soon. Why? Because, as it happens, for your entertainment, pleasure, and enjoyment, the most profound event in human history is about to take place, putting aside certain special events in religious faiths of great significance. And those of that faith would say, no, that event would be the most profound. I understand, but secularly speaking, the most profound is about to happen. And it's not optional. We don't have a choice on a vote going to be taken. It's going to take place. There are forces moving it to happen, and they are moving for good purpose, and I believe they are correct in doing so. There are also forces moving to prevent it from happening. Nothing strange about that. But the balance is shift to going forward as opposed to going backwards. And so here it comes. We're going to pass through, as I have this nice little pretty cool painting. This is called The Gate by Rod Millar and Dan Cummings. It's one of those CGI graphics, computer graphic art, and this represents for me the gate that we're going to pass through. It's like a stargate, literally. Stargates are really popular in science fiction, have been for 50 years. And I fell in love with that idea when I was 12. Finally, they made that movie, which was not bad, pretty good movie. Then they made the television show, a little hokey, a little kitschy, but you know, it was pretty funny. I liked the show. But the idea that you pass through a gate and you can go anywhere in the universe, wow, pretty cool idea. Endless script possibilities. Well, in fact, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to pass through this gate and we're going to be engaging the rest of the galaxy and, by definition, the universe, possibly within a few months, possibly maybe a year. That's close. And that's why I'm here, to learn what Europe is thinking, to get a sense of people outside the U.S., and also to get the basic information out. This is a big deal. And the more people know in advance, the more prepared they're going to be, the more time they have to think about it. And for many, they may choose to engage it, affect it, to be a part of it, not simply be a spectator. So we're going to get into this and move as quickly as possible. We'll take a break in about an hour. We'll come back to some more, and then we'll take some questions. Now, let's see. Basic presentation is called The Truth Embargo, Barack Obama, and the Politics of Disclosure. And this is the website right here for my organization, paradigmresearchgroup.org. I'm going to shift this just a little bit over, like that. This is a portal to about 6 websites, including the main PRG site right there. And there are over 10,000 links on those sites to other stuff. You can enter there and, well, you can be busy for months. We start with 1947, very quickly. I'm going to move very fast. You know a lot of this already. Huge year in history of the 20th century. A lot of very profound things happen in that year. Not the least of which is, in middle of that year, a magazine called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientist published a special clock to the world on the cover of their magazine right here at 7 minutes to midnight as a method of addressing the nuclear threat. These scientists, these atomic scientists, had just finished building the bomb. Some of them are having second thoughts about that. They even had made an attempt to prevent Truman from dropping the bomb, but obviously that failed. So as the situation evolved very quickly from 45 to 47, they became very concerned. So they created this clock, doomsday clock. Midnight on the clock, nuclear war. All right, that's what it's all about. And it was designed to draw attention. It was a public relations move. Every time the world events would change and they needed to move the clock, say, closer to midnight, they'd put out a press release and there would be a lot of media coverage. And it was just to let us know, in case we were to forget, that we were in the process of building a vast nuclear arsenal, and we had a Cold War going on, and if somebody made a mistake, it was going to end civilization. So, as it happens, that clock's still here, and they still publish it, and recently they moved it closer to midnight, a couple of minutes closer to midnight, which is interesting for many reasons. So, one of the first things I did after creating Paradigm Research Group is I created another clock called the Paradigm Clock and published it to the internet and went on media and shows and talked about it. Obviously, I didn't have the means to draw the kind of attention that they did, but still, I wanted to create another option here with another kind of midnight, right? Not nuclear war, something else. And so we created the Paradigm Clock, and what is midnight on that clock? Midnight in the Paradigm Clock is disclosure. And you might say, well, what is disclosure? We know the word is a basic word. We sort of understand that word. But that's not really what we mean in the advocacy that we're involved in. It doesn't have a small d. It has a big D. Disclosure is very carefully defined in this advocacy. Right? All advocacy movements and all major political activist movements must have new language that is specific to the goal, or people can't get the idea, and they can't coalesce around the idea. Disclosure is exactly this and nothing more. It is the formal acknowledgement by the world's governments of a non-human extraterrestrial intelligence engaging the human race. Probably starting with one government first, and then the rest will follow within days. All right? This is disclosure. This is midnight on the paradigm clock. And after fiddling with this for years, it dawned on me one day that if you look at the 20th century, from 1947 on, it has essentially been a kind of a race between these two clocks. Which one was going to strike midnight first? Was it going to be the paradigm clock, disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence, the formal acknowledgement, or was it going to be this clock, nuclear war? It isn't over yet. This race is still not done. And this one could win. Very possible, right? So there's actually, as you can see right away, we've moved well beyond the issue of extraterrestrials, are they here or not here, and what do they look like, to some pretty important major issues that have the potential to affect everybody on the planet, including wonderful Scandinavia, which is great, and I don't want anything bad to happen to it. All right, now, the other thing that happened in 1947 is that the modern UFO era began. Whatever has happened in the tens of thousands of years previously, and there's a lot of evidence that some things going on back there, and there might have been some crash vehicles in the 30s. We certainly had the Foo Fighters during the war, famous events that occurred all throughout the theaters. These lights were just running rings around these airplanes. And almost certainly certain people in the government figured out right away, oops, guess what? Turns out some of that science fiction is true, because we can't do anything about this. But they weren't shooting planes down, just kind of following them around. That was a tip-off, but that's not the beginning of the modern era. The modern era begins with this man. Kenneth Arnold, a pilot flying near Mount Rainier, sees 9 of these quasi-airlift bodies flying near Mount Rainier. All right? He's a substantial person, well-respected. The people, the media got on the story. One member of the press called it a flying saucer, and off we go. The modern era begins. Late June of 1947. Well, just 2 weeks later, one of these probably crashed at Roswell, maybe 2, right? Notice this is not a saucer. That's a very significant thing to note right now. Now, so the modern era of UFOs is off and running, right? There were sightings all over the world. Well, all over they were coming in from all those places that had news and the ability to report. They could have been happening everywhere in the world, but not everywhere in the world in 47 was in touch with us. But in any event, we're off and running, and something else starts in 47. The truth embargo starts. This is a carefully defined term again. It has a special meaning. It is this: a policy initiated by the U.S. government with cooperation of its World War II allies to withhold from their citizens the truth of extraterrestrial non-human beings engaging the human race. Withholding the truth, withholding the formal acknowledgement, containing it, controlling it for national security reasons. It was legal. That's why I don't call this a cover-up. Others have. I don't. It's a truth embargo. It was legal. No laws are broken. It's perfectly legal under the National Security Act based upon national security reasons. And I wouldn't want to quibble with the decisions made in 1947, though I kind of wish they had made a different one. Now, this truth embargo gets underway in a kind of formal way, some informal, but semi-official way, when this gentleman, General Roger Ramey, who is the boss of the Roswell Army Air Force Base commandant, essentially steps in and turns this story, right? RAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region, right? Which had a lot of press heading on their way to Roswell immediately from around the country and even from out of the country. In 24 hours, he turned it to this story. Ramey empties Roswell saucer, says it's just a weather balloon, right? Right? In other words, the fine officers of the only nuclear Air Force base in the world somehow managed to think that, right, was from a saucer, when in fact, of course, it was from a weather balloon. And the embargo was on, right? Now, we don't know exactly who ordered Ramey to do this, but it's quite likely it came all the way from President Truman. But we don't know. There's no paper trail at this time. And they destroyed a lot of the records from that era, almost certainly intentionally. So it starts in 1947 with General Roger Ramey, and I believe it will end with this gentleman here, Barack Obama, probably this year or early next year. So the UFO era I've referred to started in 1947, and in my view it ended in 1991. Now this will get a little closer to home for you all. But why am I picking 1991? Well, first and foremost, the extraterrestrial hypothesis had been proven based on the evidence available and the simple application of logic easily by 1952. Any reasonable person would have known that. The government knew that. And there were people sort of figured it out, though it was not an era where you could just jump up and say, wait a minute, that's not true, and I'm going to start a big deal about that. No. If the government wants to go that way, let them go that way. So after that, it was just proving it over and over and over again and piling the evidence up on top of evidence. Well, by 91, it had been proven 10 times over, so the proof wasn't the issue, but there was another matter here that ends this era. 1991 is a very special year. Why? Because one of the most important dates in the 20th century, maybe the most important event, is a 2-year period between 1989 and Christmas Day of 1991. Starts here with the fall of the Berlin Wall, which, by the way, we're in that celebration. It is the 20th year celebration, a lot going on in Germany over the next few months. And then it ends, the process of transition ends when the Soviet Union disassembles into the 14 republics. On Christmas Day of 91, they outlaw the Communist Party, at least temporarily, and they, shortly after that, acknowledge that they have retargeted their missiles, which is very nice of them to do. I thought that was nice. They can retarget them in about 10 minutes, but nevertheless, they said they retargeted. I trusted them. I felt better. So the Cold War was over. And this was a big deal for a lot of things. A lot of things were supposed to happen next. Well, didn't really. A lot of things that should have happened didn't happen. All right? But one thing that was likely to happen did happen, and that is this. The truth embargo started in 1947 for national security reasons, because the military and intelligence people who had just finished winning World War II knew that Stalin, who was the real deal, Stalin was, this is a dude here. This is a formidable person, all right? Capable of killing 10, 20 million people personally, right? That kind of guy. And he had German scientists working on ballistic missiles. He had the atomic bomb secrets, and he had the hydrogen bomb secrets, and they were working on those technologies. We knew this. There was an iron curtain across Europe, and things did not look good. And so they could not allow this out until they knew more about these ETs, where they came from, why they were here, what kind of technology they had. They had a crash vehicle, at least one. And so it was like, we're going to hold off on this, and we'll get to it when this thing with the Soviet Union settles down. Well, as we know, it went on for 44 years. And with each year after 47, it got worse and worse and worse. The Berlin crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, the missiles were improved, the warheads were made larger, they were then MIRV, they called MIRV, multiple re-entry vehicles, I think. Then they had submarine developments, so you had missiles off the coast of Russia and the United States. We almost had nuclear war several times, even in addition to the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it wasn't going to happen until that war was over, and it doesn't end until 91. Once the Cold War is over, disclosure is inevitable, and the process begins. I call it the disclosure train. It starts to leave the station real slow on Christmas Day, 1991. Okay. Why is that? What's materially important about that? Well, thousands of people in the United States government and some of the allies were aware of the ET presence. either directly or indirectly, or they've been tipped off. There were thousands that were working on the issue, crash retrieval teams and what have you. And they had to be kept silent. They were patriots. They signed national security oaths, all kinds of good stuff, and they did keep quiet. And one of the reasons they kept quiet is they did understand that this Cold War could not get out of hand, and that the ET issue was far too potentially destabilizing. And so they kept their mouth shut and took the issue to the grave with them. But when the war ends, that barrier drops. And some of them felt that they could talk, and they started to talk. We call them witnesses. That's a specific term again. Not just anybody. People that worked in the military, worked in the intelligence services, worked for NASA, worked for the CIA, worked for government contractors doing classified defense work. High-level people or people of some rank and station, like airline pilots or high members of the Vatican, whatever. Anybody in that genre that came forward, we called them witnesses. They started slow, but each year more started coming out. 10, 15, 20, 30. Initially, anonymous phone calls, anonymous email, then they'd mention their name and they'd sign their name. Then they started speaking out, giving interviews, writing books, presenting to conferences. Their numbers are now in the hundreds. These people had careers. They are significant individuals, some of them very high rank. And their collective testimony makes it unequivocally clear that the extraterrestrial presence, which was proven by 52, reproven 12 times over by the end of the Cold War, it was true. Okay? No surprises there. And so the emergence of the witnesses from 91 guarantees that the disclosure process, the exopolitical processes, are going to go forward no matter what. And so that put us out of the UFO era and into a new era. And that era is the exopolitics era, which starts on Christmas Day, 1991, with that formal end of the Communist Party, in my opinion. We start from there and go forward. Now, initially, as the political process evolved and got going in the early 90s, there were a lot of things going on. I could talk all night about them, but I'm not going to. But there was much going on. By about 95, 96, things started to kind of come together. I entered the arena in July of 96. And by 1997, we were really starting to talk to American people, certainly, in this way, about the UFO issue in this manner. And one of the reasons we were able to do this was because of a gentleman by the name of Art Bell. Art Bell was the charismatic late-night talk show host of Coast to Coast AM. He started that show in the early 90s, and it became extremely popular, the largest late-night talk show in the United States, even though it ran from 10 to 3 in the morning on the West Coast and from 1 to 5 in the morning on the East Coast, right? Now you can get it on the internet, live stream, watch it, listen to it whenever you want. Art didn't like politics. He was tired of it. But when this developed, Art allowed us to come on and get into this material. So he deserves a great deal of credit for that. And one day he will get acknowledged for that. So now we had a core audience of 4 or 5 million people to sort of get the message out to. And that's all you need. That's under the 100 monkey rule. That's easily enough to get things going. So we started off, the word exopolitics wasn't going to turn up for 5 more years. So I started off calling it the politics of UFOs. It's a bridge, see? UFOs, which is the old era, right? Politics, which is the new era. Okay. And eventually, that after a year or so, we dropped the UFO out and went to politics of disclosure, and you remember what disclosure is, all right? So we're talking about the politics of getting disclosure, which is the formal acknowledgement of the ET presence by the world governments. And then, as time goes on, politics of disclosure becomes exopolitics. In the year 2000, because a gentleman by the name of Alfred Weber, an activist attorney, publishes a book called Exopolitics, Law, Governance, and something in the Universe. Can't remember that. And the term was obvious to me. That was it. And immediately Alfred got on the shows, and we brought him into Coast to Coast, and so forth. And others joined up. So exopolitics as a word takes off in late 2000. But so the politics of disclosure formally becomes exopolitics around late 2000. But what is exopolitics? Now, it isn't in the dictionary yet, and it's not in the encyclopedia yet. This is the definition I've been shepherding for a number of years through Wiktionary and the Webster Open Dictionary, which is where they get their new words. They go there and then they pull them out of there. It hasn't quite made it, but it's close. And this is the key definition here. And I'll come back to this, but exopolitics really should be exopolitical science. And the reason we don't use that phrase is because it's a little premature. No university in the United States will teach the subject, all 5,000 of them, right? That's also true of the UK and all of Europe. There have been a couple of small courses because a professor was involved, really no significant credit, a couple of continuing education courses. But amazingly, some 5,000 to 8,000 colleges and universities filled with hundreds of thousands of professors with tenure to protect their freedom of inquiry have managed to go along with the truth embargo for 6 decades and do absolutely nothing, right? With a couple of exceptions. It is the greatest intellectual failure of all time, and they will have to answer for this. But if they did deal with this issue, they would call it exopolitical science, right? But since we don't have that yet, exopolitics serves for both terms. And exopolitical science is the policy, the art or science of government as concerned with guiding or influencing governmental, I forgot to fix this. It's supposed to be policy. Bad slide, right? Very inefficient. Influencing governmental policy toward extraterrestrial phenomena and extraterrestrial beings. The whole thing, right? Government action, the truth embargo, citizen processes, the social engagements, local and federal. Eventually it'll include negotiations with extraterrestrials, deals, treaties, whatever. The whole thing comes under exopolitical science. It's a very big umbrella. But exopolitics will also, so that'll be a term, but exopolitics will have additional definitions, such as exopolitical actions, practices, or policies. In other words, I'm going to go out and engage in exopolitics. Or the exopolitical opinions or sympathies of a person. Sometime in the next year or two, if you stay kind of involved in this, somebody's going to walk up to you one day, you're going to be having coffee, and they're going to ask you, what's your exopolitics? You'll know that things are happening then, and so forth. So this is what exopolitics is. Now, there is a lot of tension building up in the world, I guess, about this process underway. We have the UFO era, which was driven by ufologists, scientists, citizen scientists, some real scientists, trying to understand the UFO phenomena. The government wouldn't, they would. And they tried to learn about it and prove it, I guess you could say, or provide the best scientific basis possible. That still goes on, it's still important, all right? They spent a lot of times. I know one gentleman I met in France just recently, Professor Ludwiger, he's an astrophysicist. He has been involved in the UFO study for 55 years. And he's enjoyed it, all right? But, you see, that wasn't going to resolve the issue because there was a truth embargo in place. And you could prove it all you wanted. You could come up with perfect sightings and equations and study to trace cases or whatever. The government could care less. The government knew there were ETs here. They didn't need any of us to prove it to them. There was an embargo on it. And so you could spend 30 years proving it. They weren't going to acknowledge a thing. So if you enjoyed the process, good for you. But if you were doing it to actually resolve the issue, you were in for a really tough time. This is a political issue, and it will be resolved politically by the disclosure process and the disclosure movement. The people that were in the UFO era are not happy about this. They feel that a bunch of people, a bunch of newbies, Johnny come lately. There we go. I got nothing but idiots. That's all I got is idiots. New people come in, take the ball from them, and they're going to, kick it in the goal, right, and get all the press. They're very unhappy. There's a lot of tension building up. It's getting nasty, and it's going to get worse. There are accusations that exopolitics is a religion. It's not religion, trust me. Though we will be passing a bowl later, right? And they've accused it of being a cult. Well, you know, I'm looking at all these candles here, and I'm thinking, well, maybe it is. Turns out it is a cult, which is great. You know, and I'll be the cult leader. And here's what I want everybody to do. No, it's not a cult. It's ridiculous, but it just shows you they're not happy. And so you will be seeing a lot of argument, debate, flame wars on the internet about this. But exopolitics is here to stay. How do we know that? I'll tell you how we know it. If you Google orange juice in a Google box, you're going to get millions of pages. Why? Because you're going to get all the pages that have orange and all the now you see, you should always turn off your phone.
That could be the radio.
It's very upsetting when you don't turn off your phone. Hang on. You see, it was the CIA. You get with orange, with juice, and orange juice. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means it's a lot of pages. And that's true. You put in 8 words, you'll get... But, you see, exopolitics has only one definition in the English language. It isn't a word yet. I mean, it is a word, but I mean, it's not in the dictionary. There is no other way that this word is being used except in this context. And when you put this word into Google, you get 280,000 pages, okay? And so it's here to stay. You get actually 700,000 in Yahoo. I have no idea why. I think Yahoo has, you know, I don't know. Yahoo maybe has got, they got search engines in the galaxy or something. I don't know. But there's 3 times as many pages on Yahoo. So, the truth embargo, right, which starts in 47, okay, in my view, should end this year. One of the things that's delaying it is the little economic problem that developed last October. Yeah, it's a minor problem, nothing big. But still, it's been a bit of a distraction. And we'll talk about that later. But that delay is only for a while. Still possible for this year, all right? And there's a lot of expectation about it. You're seeing some people talk about this on the net, which is good. Expectation is good. If not, then early next year. And we'll get into that later. So, there you've gotten a quick snapshot, right? A quick sort of opening sense of the foundation for what's about to happen. That's really a 20-hour lecture. I just gave you the 30-minute version. Okay, now, let's now get more specific. The Paradigm Research Group was founded in 1996 for one reason and one reason only, to resolve the UFO ET issue once and for all through political means, all right, because science wasn't going to do it. The first thing that happened was that I relocated to Washington, D.C. in July of 1996, and a few weeks later, by intention, filed with the United States Congress as a registered lobbyist. Now, this was a very calculated move, because I knew that the political press in Washington track all of the lobbying registrations. They want to know who is lobbying for what. So if you sign up and you're lobbying for big oil or big pharma or coal or Kuwait or whatever, they want to know this. All right? They want to know who is pushing the issues in Washington. And so every day they check all the new registrations, and in one day in late July they're going along, and then it goes, whoop, Paradigm Research Group, Stephen Bassett, is registered as a lobbyist on behalf of UFO research and activist organizations pursuing the end of a truth embargo of the extraterrestrial presence and seeking full briefings of the president and congressional hearings. And they went, that's new, that's different. And so they called me up immediately and I got substantial coverage. That's what you have to do if you're going to be an activist. You have to get heard. And so someone has got to listen to you. And so I got a big full-page article in the Washington Post in the business section and so forth and so forth. So off we go. This is my little trajectory. There are many other groups and other people involved. Then in 1998, about a year and a half later, 1997, late 97, is when I published the website, the Paradigm Research Group website, which was called the Paradigm Clock site back then, with the Paradigm Clock on it. Started publicizing that, going on Art Bell. And then in 1999, in July, just 3 years later, is when I launched the Political Action Committee for PRG, its Political Action Committee, XPAC, and it was the first political action committee ever to register with the FEC, Federal Election Commission, for this issue, thus attracting more press. Then in the next major project, 2002, as a maneuver, an activist maneuver, I ran for Congress in the Maryland district, just outside of Washington, D.C., knowing that it would attract attention to the issue near Washington, where the government is. And but what was important is I had to get on the ballot. I had to get on the November ballot. And I was able to do that by running as an independent and gathering signatures. And so in November, or in October, during the campaign, it was the Republican candidate Morella, the Democratic candidate Van Hollen, and myself on the stage taking questions and debating, quote, the issues, including the ET issue, which was discussed and brought up. And this attracted a good deal of attention. And so it worked out fairly well. I received 1,700 votes, about 1%, and I personally went and kissed every single one of them, right, afterwards. Then, in 2004, the next major project was the launch of the X Conference at the Gaithersburg Hilton in Maryland, about 11 miles outside the Washington Beltway. There have been 5 of these conferences. This was the first conference focused on the UFO-ET issue from the exopolitical perspective. This stands for Exopolitics Expo, right? And this conference has been an intellectual and advocacy success. In the 5 conferences, we have had 79 speakers. These are these speakers, all of them, including how many times some of them have spoke, as well as some that have received awards from Paradigm Research Group. Some of the best-known people in the field are represented here. And the group, these 79 speakers have made 110 presentations, included researchers, activists, filmmakers, media, documentarists, former members of military services and civilian government agencies, and collectively they've written over 200 books. Includes 16 PhDs, 3 medical doctors, 2 jurish doctors, 1 astronaut, and a Vatican Monsignor, actually the head exorcist of the Vatican, a member of the Curia, Corrado Balducci. It's a pretty interesting group, and the conference has been pretty successful. Unfortunately, it has lost a lot of money. It's lost about $60,000, I think, the 5 events. It's always something that was creating a problem. The last conference lost about $26,000, and this next conference, scheduled for April 16, 18, is dependent upon me raising at least $20,000 by the end of October. And one of the reasons I'm in Europe is to do that. And there are certain people that I'm trying to connect with. There's an emerging group of individuals who are just on the edge of putting real money behind this advocacy, which is going to make a tremendous impact, because most of everything you've seen done so far has been done with practically nothing, all right? Using the power of the internet, the most important invention in human history. To give you an example, Robbie Williams, the rock star in the UK, I'd never heard of him, and so when I first saw the articles about him and his interest in UFOs, I kind of put it aside, and I considered it a tabloid thing, and I didn't include it in my archive, which I'll show you later. But when I arrived in Liverpool and got on the train, I opened up the Telegraph, and on the second page, here's this picture of an estate in Wiltshire, right, UK. And it says that Robbie Williams recently bought this estate in Wiltshire for £8.5 million. That's about $14 million. And I'm reading, going, boy, he must have sold a lot of records. This guy must be pretty good, right? And of course, he's been going around the world talking about UFOs. He's indicated he's a contactee. He's very excited about it. He's 35 years old. And then I happen to note the caption on the photo. The name of the house he just bought is the Compton Bassett House in Wiltshire. And so I said, I must get in touch with Robbie Williams. Turns out that Nick Pope's assistant has known him for 10 years. And so we have emails going to Robbie, who spends half his time in the UK and half his time in California, where I'm now based. Just 2 days ago, Olivia Newton-John came out and said that she has seen UFOs and is very interested in them. All right? Dan Aykroyd has given his name to MUFON. There are many musicians that are starting to address this issue. Muse, one of the hottest bands in all of Europe, has written the anthem for exopolitics called Exopolitics. And it's a pretty good song. I mean, it appeals more if you're like 25. But nevertheless, it's a cool song, Exopolitics. And there are other bands. We're starting to list them, up to maybe 15, 20, that are doing music in this genre. Other movie stars are hinting that they may be interested. So we are expecting a breakthrough in the funding, hopefully soon, because there are reasons why we must get this done. We'll talk about that. Now, I'll mention one other thing very briefly. I normally do not do this, but and I had to in this case for this talking tour, which is made possible by 18 or 19 hosts, just like Frederick, who have been putting me up all across Europe. Otherwise, I couldn't even have begun to do this. I have brought DVDs from the previous X conferences. There have been 110 presentations. I have about 35 of them here on the table, one disc per presentation. And I am making those available to people. Any purchases of those DVDs is helping this work go forward and is helping to pay for this trip. It's that simple. And what we have here is, first and foremost, the price is like 75 krona for one, 3 for 200. And, thanks to Frederick, anybody who buys a DVD gets a free copy of the James Fox's Out of the Blue documentary, the best ever done on the subject, the anniversary edition, which includes Halt and Fight Simonkin. We have 21 of those, so the first 21. But we have that. And I also have about 15 or 20 of my presentation at Sitges, Spain, which was the Exopolitics Summit put on by Exopolitics Spain, all right, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So when we have the break, I'll be over there afterwards. I'll be over there, and your support would be obviously very much appreciated. Now, let's go on with the work of PRG. In 2008, probably the most, long-term, the most important project of PRG in its 13 years was the launching of the Exopolitics World Network. Simple as it could possibly be. And it demonstrates the power of the internet like nothing else could. Well, actually, there are many examples of the internet's power. Essentially, the idea was simple. Let's create one site, one fundamental exopolitics site for as many nations as possible. We'll give them similar names: Exopolitics Spain, Exopolitics Germany, Exopolitics France. We'll use a URL protocol that creates a certain sense of network. Exopoliticsgermany.de, exopoliticsspain.es, exopolitics France. Whatever that is, that far. You get the idea? And we're now up to 20 nations. All volunteer, no money changes hands. Whoever showed up and wanted a country, they got it. And amazingly enough, the quality of the people that have come forward to create these sites is tremendous. And they have done great sites. And once they had the sites up, they started planning conferences and other activism within the countries. Already we have a growing network that is impacting Europe. Give you an example, Exopolitics Spain, Pepo and Holber. He had a partner who was a businessman, Miguel Salatis, and they said, let's have an Exopolitics Summit, using that as a platform. They put a summit together in Sitges, Spain, south of Barcelona, and using the net and YouTube trailers and all the stuff, they got 1,300 people there. Actually made money, made something like $15,000. They got press coverage, a beautiful auditorium at the hotel there, full auditorium with a massive screen. This was a significant event. And most significant about it was that the primary audience were Generation X. Generation X are the sons and daughters of the baby boomers, of which I am one. All right? This is not the case in the United States, but in Europe, Generation X is getting on board the disclosure train. They have the energy, they have the tech, they have the computer skills, and they're moving very, very fast. All right, this was definitely true in Germany, where I was just at. Robert Fleischer has a staff of 15, 17 already, all in that range from 30 to 40, Generation X. So we're up to 20 countries. Ireland just came on. The island of Mauritius will be on soon in the South Pacific. And if you go to the website, exopoliticsworld.net, right, you can see the countries that are not there. If you have a friend in one of those countries, maybe they'd like to take that country on. The ones that are not up yet, you can tell which ones are up and which ones aren't. So this is a highly successful project that costs virtually nothing to do. We also created, for nothing, an Exopolitics World Net Facebook group page. Now has 1,000 members. And we've got nearly 30 administrators who can all communicate with those members. We have an Exopolitics World Net Yahoo list where all the administrators can communicate with each other. Cost nothing. All right? Facebook is a big deal. Not necessarily the friends page, so that's important, no question about it. But the group pages. During the election, the candidates who were running for president of the United States had group pages. And under the rules of Facebook, anybody can join a group page, right? You don't have to friend up. And so they had 1-2 million members to their group page. So if they wanted to send a message to their group page members on Facebook saying how wonderful they were, they could simply write it up and send it off through Facebook for nothing. It's like having a 2 million capacity bulk mail server, which I have a bulk mail server, and 2 million capacity would cost me tens of thousands of dollars a month. Facebook free. And so it's filling up with groups and causes and initiatives. The people haven't even begun to figure out how to leverage this, but they will. All right. So all of this is built into the Exopolitics World Network, all free. It's a great success, and long term, it will be one of the most important projects. We have a similar network we're creating for the United States. It's coming along slowly, about 10 states. Hopefully, we'll have 30 states eventually. Again, similar concept: exopoliticsarizona.us, exopoliticsmontana.us, and then this is the most important project of PRG short term. It is the Million Facts on Washington. It is underway right now, and I have great hopes for it, and you'll be hearing more about that. And then hopefully next year I'm going to launch a website that will be a full media site that will have all of the appropriate things that you have to be a full media site, including advertisements. I don't advertise on any of the other stuff. I'm not in business, but this has to have advertisements. And by doing this, PRG and PMD will be able to give press credentials to all of the paranormal, alternative, UFO journalists, investigators out there who are working for websites and magazines, whatever, so they can get into press conferences and even apply for White House press access if they wanted to. So that's coming next year. This tour is essentially servicing all of that, in addition to getting some input from Europe. It's my first time to Europe. I was in France in '79. I've done 2 brief conferences in Italy and then Spain. I have been to none of these other countries. This is my first time. 18 stops, 10 countries, 40 days. Finished here, went to Helsinki, Stockholm, Berlin, now I'm in Copenhagen. Going to go to London for a meeting with actually an advisor to heads of state, believe it or not, a pretty interesting guy who was willing to take a private meeting to hear about this issue. That's the kind of thing, it's starting to happen. And then I'm going to come over to Brussels, speak at a conference there, on to Holst in the Netherlands, and then Zurich, Rennes, St. Pierre-en-Port, and Paris. The whole thing is, if you go to paradigmresearchgroup.org, you can see the Europe tour link, and you can go see the schedule if you have friends in any of these locations. Okay? So, now, let's get into, see how we're doing. I'm going to break in about 9 minutes. Okay. Now we're going to get into the hardcore information that justifies what I have just told you. Right? When I say disclosure is happening soon, I'm not, just guessing. I'm not playing, I'm not, picking cards out of a deck or something. I'm not a tarot deck. There are very powerful reasons why this is going to happen. We're going to talk about that. The truth embargo has 5 huge pressures on it, right? Trying to crack it, right? An embargo literally creates a truth vacuum, right? The government carves a hole in reality, creates a vacuum, and you know what happens to vacuums. Everything wants to rush in and fill them up, all right? And break them down. And so there are 5 things trying to break this vacuum down and end this embargo. They are beginning, most importantly, and not most importantly, but obviously with these guys, the ETs, okay? Extraterrestrial in the advocacy work is broadly defined. Some people want to argue about it. I don't argue about it. I don't care where they're from. If they're from another planet, fine. If they're from the future, fine. If they're from another dimension, fine. If they're from the inner Earth, oh, that's fine, but it's really weird, right? Right? And I'd like to know more about that. All I know is they weren't born, over in Berlin. They're not, tourists coming in from Helsinki. They are advanced. They are greatly different. They have telepathic powers and very good transportation. And that's a big deal. And so far as we're concerned, extraterrestrial fits all of those from a political perspective. This is some of the photos. There are others. There are other kinds. There are 4 or 5 basic species, races, whatever you want to call them, which we know about from the 100,000 or more contact reports that are now been turned in. I mean, you may not realize this, but the number of people that have written up what's happening to them and sent it into the researchers in the tens and tens and tens of thousands. They can't service it all. There isn't enough people in this country, enough researchers in this country able to service the contactees who would like to look into their past. And these reports are stacked up in the files of researchers like Hopkins and Mack, well, the late John Mack, David Jacobs, Yvonne Smith, and to put you in perspective, Joe Montaldo, who spoke at X Conference 2009, has created a group called ICAR, right? International Committee for Abduction Research, I believe that is the name. And it's the largest contactee group in the world. It's up to about 15,000 members and growing, right? Mostly contactees, working with other contactees. Let me be clear. I don't have any trouble going on a news show, CNN or Fox News, and talking about this. I'll do it. I won't even hesitate. The evidence for contact with ETs is overwhelmingly confirming. It is not an option. Susan Clancy of Harvard will tell you that the whole thing is explained by sleep paralysis. And that will be her legacy. And I feel very badly for her. She's been used by Harvard to try to de-Mackify that university, which has utterly failed this issue to its everlasting disgrace. And she is receiving death threats because, frankly, some people are so offended that she could try to explain 100,000, 200,000 contactee reports where people are being taken from their cars, from trains, right, directed off into the woods as sleep paralysis. They're very angry about that, so I can appreciate that. But trust me, it isn't sleep paralysis, it's ET contact. Taking people from every country in the world, including Denmark. I have talked personally to hundreds of contactees, not as a researcher. I'm just, I listen. They come and they tell me their stories. You want to know something? Out of the hundreds, maybe 2 struck me as being making it up, right? The other are utterly convincing. I can't find 2 politicians in Washington I can believe, all right? But 98% of all the contactees, totally credible to me, at least on a personal level. So this issue is in play. It is the most important exopolitical issue, ultimately, and it will be dealt with, though maybe not right away. So the point is that, you see, the government is making a case that this is a non-issue. It's not worthy of investigation. It's obviously not a threat because it's a non-issue. There's nothing going on here. And in that regard, the government of the United States, and by extension, the government of its allies, such as Denmark, France, Germany, Spain, the United Kingdom, are much like a fellow that you may or may not recall that became legendary back in about 2003, and he was called Baghdad Bob. You recall Baghdad Bob? All right, let me bring up a memory on that. Baghdad Bob was the public relations guy for Saddam Hussein. He was essentially the interface to the press. And so, as the whole thing got shock and awe and all of that got underway, Fox and they would go talk to him. He was the designated person. And he was unfailing, right? They were winning in the desert. They were winning, Kuwait. They were annihilating the invasion and all of this. Fine. I'm not saying it was a good idea to go to war, believe me. I'm just saying that this is what Baghdad Bob was saying. And it got pretty funny, but it reached a climax very late, just prior to the pulling down of the Saddam statue. When it was CNN or Fox, I forget which one, goes to Baghdad Bob to get his statement regarding what's happening, regarding Baghdad and the army, encroaching army. And he's sitting there telling them that they have defeated the American tanks in the desert, they have laid waste, there are thousands of American dead bodies out there, and that they're going to win the war. And as he's talking, American tanks are rolling into Baghdad behind him, about maybe a half a mile down the road, So there's Baghdad Bob, and behind him are the tanks coming in. Kind of funny, isn't it? Well, the United States has pulled a 62-year Baghdad Bob. It has to go and say over and over again, there's nothing here. And as it's saying it, they're flying around overhead, okay? Some Army, Air Force guy, Air Force general, or Air Force colonel has got to come out and tell you the third explanation for Roswell, and at that very moment, his brother-in-law is being taken out of his bedroom for 40 minutes of table work and a saucer somewhere, all right? These entities are everywhere. They are photographed, they are filmed, they land, they leave trace cases, they take people, right? They're seen by pilots, radar people, they're seen by Navy ships. Right? They're seen by NASA. There are hundreds of witnesses coming forward that the government said, no, there's nothing going on here. You see how tough it is? These ETs are not cooperating. They are not going along with the program. And so it makes it tough. And I'm sure the government would much prefer that they would be a little more discreet, just kind of tippy-toe in, don't make a lot of noise, keep those saucers out of sight, but that's not what they do. This is significant. Exopolitically, it is very significant. Why are these extraterrestrials so damn obvious? All right? So they say they're not. In fact, they are. In Mexico, there for a number of years, back in the 90s, you couldn't look up without seeing an extraterrestrial craft. I mean, they were everywhere. Right? I'm surprised they didn't start parking in the parking garages in Mexico City, taking up all the prime spots. All right? The ETs are a real problem for the truth embargo. And then we have public awareness. It's non-trivial. It's real simple. The awareness of the extraterrestrial issue in the first or industrialized world is running about 99.9%. All right? That means if you go up to 1,000 people, 990 of them are basically going to say, yeah, I know what you mean by extraterrestrial, UFO, of course I do. Now, if you had a product to sell and you had a 99% awareness rating of your product, you'd be worth billions of dollars. All right? So the public awareness is kind of a problem. UFO is the second best known acronym in the world after USA. So we know this because we've been taking polls for years and the numbers just keep growing. I need more down here. I need some later polls. But the current polling is running right about 50% of people polled say ETs are here. That's true for US, Canada, UK. About 85% say the government's absolutely lying about it. All right. About 20% now are saying that they've seen something. They had a sighting that they felt was unusual. That's a pretty substantial number. 20% of the industrialized world is 200 million people. And in a recent poll, a poll about 2 years ago, they added another question. Bold, I'm glad they did it. They need to do it again. How many, anonymous polls now, have you had contact with an extraterrestrial? Right? 8%. 8%. Well, that would be 24 million people in the U.S. Right? And that would be 80 million people, worldwide. I mean, in the industrialized world. That's a big number, okay? Big number. Let's cut it in half. 40 million people. So, 40 million people are having direct contact with extraterrestrials. Should the government care about that? No, I think no problem. I'm sure they don't mean any harm. We don't investigate them, no problem. You're on your own, okay? I hope it works out for you. Well, that's a big problem. Public awareness is making it, and public awareness, just in case, you know, the ETs and their comings and goings wasn't enough, Hollywood has made sure we get the point. ETs are all over the entertainment industry. This is just the top 32 grossing movies of all time, all right? The lowest one here, world gross, 538 million, not bad, good money. Of the top 32, 10 of them are about extraterrestrials, and several of the others are kind of in the fantasy science fiction genre. But let's just stick with the extraterrestrials. And then some of the best known, like Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, are down here, but what can I say? They've generated billions of dollars of revenue for Hollywood. About a year and a half ago, 4 television series in the US about ETs were launched at the same time. I think 3 of them were gone in about a month. No problem. They generated some more. They can't get the ET stuff on the TV. There's 4 or 5 extraterrestrial movies coming out in the next 5 months, including a mega huge thing that's going to happen early next year called Avatar. It's going to change everything, right? Cameron, first name escapes me, but James Cameron has created a new kind of 3-dimensional camera techniques. He is filming in this new technique. You will be able to use polarizing glasses that are designed to then take that technique and convert it into super duper 3D, okay? No headaches. In no time, people are going to have their own designer versions of this. They'll have them at home. They'll bring them with them. They're going to take you into space. You're going to be walking around with ETs. People are going to go to these movies like you would not believe. This movie is going to make $1 billion, all right? Because, let's face it, everybody knows this is real. More and more people know this is real. It's exciting. But the government says, there's nothing going on here. It's just fantasy. Just fantasy. No big deal. Now, we're up to multi-tiered media, which is an important subject. So we're going to take a break right now, about 10 minutes. We'll come back and we'll start with a multi-tiered media. Is that okay? All right? There is some misinformation out there, which I encourage you to be cautious about. This whole idea that the media is controlled and consolidated, and a few powers are dictating everything that's being said. That's not true. There's no question there's been some consolidation. The networks in the United States are owned by, 2 of them are owned by defense contractors. Very interesting. One of them may get sold soon, right? That's good. There was an attempt by Clear Channel Communications to create a radio monopoly. That's pretty much over, though they did get some Republicans elected without question. Clear Channel was run by the right-wing group out of San Antonio, Texas. And yes, everyone wants to influence the media, including me. You want to get them to cover what you want. You want them to say good things about what you do. We know that. But this misinformation is diabolical, because by spreading this idea that everything is controlled and that everything is lies and all of the papers and what have you, basically you're telling people, well, there's nothing you can do, right? Don't trust anything, don't read anything, don't pay attention, because it's all controlled anyway. This is similar to what I call catastrophic thinking. All the ideas that you see out there about the world's going to end in this year, next year, 2012, whatever. Cataclysms, Armageddons, giant meteors. You see, I think the powers that be are behind some of that, because nothing will disempower you faster than thinking the world's going to end in about 2 years, right? Not much point in building a new political party. Not much point in planning for the future, so it disempowers people. But it has an appeal to people, because the world is uneven and unjust and unfair, and the end of the world means everybody dies together, the rich, the poor, the good, the bad, all of that. It's the ultimate act of justice. Propaganda, right? The media is growing like crazy. And the expansion of media is a major problem for the truth embargo. And this is, I created this a long time ago. I created this back in 1998, and I really should do more with it. because nobody else is really talking this way much. By the mid-90s, the news media, information media, had expanded and grown so much that it started to layer itself, right? Like a 7-story building, right? This would be the penthouse, all right? And on the top floor, you've got the good stuff. You've got your New York Times, your Los Angeles Times, your Washington Post, the big-time news shows, Meet the Press, whatever, Time, Newsweek magazines. You know the equivalent in Denmark, all right? The very top. Danish national television would be the top of the pyramid. Danish national radio. Okay, great. We know about that. But then you have lesser known newspapers or mid-range newspapers, certain talk shows not quite as established and what have you, forming a second tier. And then you have third-level talk shows, some of the Learning Channel, some of the cable networks and what have you, forming a third level. And then down here is alternative, Art Bell, sightings on the radio, UFO magazine, some of the alternative press will be in here, as well as some of the a little more iffy, what's the word, iffy, a little more shaky talk shows like Gordon Liddy, now gone, Oliver North, whatever. And then 3 levels of tabloids, right, to fill it out. The high-end tabloids, the mid-range tabloids, and the lower of the low. This is the bottom. This is the basement of the media empire. Down here is where you got like the Sun tabloid still around, and the Weekly World News. Now, the Weekly World News is the best job in journalism. Of course, it's now gone. It ended about a year and a half ago because they made everything up, the whole thing, back to cover, no problem. They made the whole news up, and so that was the greatest job going, and they had a ball. And it's the Weekly World News where for decades people would walk into the supermarket, and as they were checking out, that was the one that would have like the president standing on the cover with an alien, or some movie star holding an alien baby or whatever. Now why would they be doing that? And then of course the Jerry Springer Show. Now the Jerry Springer Show is the bottom of the bottom, and is the 5th sign of the apocalypse. So this is the multi-tiered media. By the way, at the top end tabloids, you've got your National Enquirer, and I think your Globe now, and most of the tabloid, quasi-tabloid print press in the UK, where they kind of mix it together, right? A lot of that's at that level. Guess what? The National Enquirer was founded by a CIA agent, all right, who then went on to found, after that was going, the Weekly World News. These are products of the CIA. Why? This is one of the nice components of the truth embargo. Plant lots of silly stories in these tabloids to completely confuse the public and make the issue seem silly. Beautiful. Genius, right? Okay? They weren't overthrowing a government or something. They're just messing with the minds of nice people going through the supermarket to buy some groceries. All right? But it got away from them. Here's why. Because once the media got this big, with your cable and your satellite, it layered so that if a story can't get in here, it gets in here. And if it can't get there, it gets in there. So if you've seen a UFO and the New York Times won't talk to you, maybe the Learning Channel will, but the National Enquirer probably will. And once the story gets in, there's an elevator connecting all the floors together. And that's the internet. Every one of these entities has an internet site. And so the news goes into there, comes out on their website, gets picked up by a higher level website, gets brought up to there, then gets covered by their main news operation, and so forth. And so whatever the story, it will find the level that is appropriate to the substance. And there's no way to stop it except right here. The truth embargo fundamentally focused on the 3 networks in the 40s, and the major newspapers such as the Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, New York Times. They got them under control, and that's all they needed for the first 20, 30 years of the truth embargo. If the New York Times is not covering it, and NBC is not covering it, it isn't real. It's that simple. And it worked well for them. Finally, all kind of institutionalized and went forward on its own momentum until this showed up, all right? So if you've just grown a watermelon the size of a Volkswagen, you can't get it in there, but there's a news story that'll come in down here maybe, okay? And who knows, maybe you'll end up on David Letterman's show on layer 2 with your giant watermelon. Or if you're an abductee, you can't get in here, but you might get in the Oprah Winfrey show here, all right, which has happened. And so with the elevator working and this layer, the stories are coming in. Now, to get that point across, I don't do this usually, but I'm going to do it here. I want to give you a perspective. There's a lot of myth out there about the media. There's no question the truth embargo is still in place with respect to the media at the top level, formally to some degree, but at the rest of the levels, it's mostly just sort of going along to get along. But those levels are changing, and this is the Paradigm Research Group main portal, and this is the assuming that this. The internet's still operating here. I was logged in. Come on. Ooh. It's taking its time. By the way, this is the main portal. So when you go to paradigmresearchgroup.org, here's a link to World Exopolitics WorldNet, USNet, the X Conference, the Facts on Washington, the Political Action Committee. All right, and this is the main site. This is the big one here. Generally, you start there, and these are quick links to important stuff. Rockefeller Initiative is here, and this. Well, I hit the wrong one. So let's back up. Well, this is the speaking tour, but I don't think it's coming up. This is. Oh, I hit the wrong one. Let's go here. Media Watch, come to me. All right. For a number of years, I have been archiving English language media coverage of the UFO ET issue. Only a few tabloid articles, not many. No alternative press, no UFO press. Just the mainstream. Now, there have been easily 10,000 articles written about the UFO issues since '47. It's hard to get these. Now, I can get a lot of these in paper, but that's a huge amount of work. All of this is based on links to internet presence, by and large, all right? So we have 158 in those first 40 years, 50 years. But as we move forward, we're getting more and more archiving going on. And by 2005, we're sucking in everything that's out there in terms of the press, by and large. And as you can see, 180 articles archived in 2006, jumps to 477 in 2007, and 1,107 last year. And it's already on a pace to do about 1,200 articles, okay, this year. This is mainstream press, including some of the high-end, like the Washington Post and the Washington Times, CNN, BBC, all right? India, Australia, Canada, all right? And a lot of local papers. They're covering the conferences. They're covering the books. They're covering the researchers. They're covering the exopolitics. They're covering events, sightings. They're covering the release of documents. You're just not seeing it at the very top. That's the last bastion, all right? And we are pressing up against that glass ceiling very, very hard. And it is only a matter of time before we're going to break through, and that will be the end of the truth embargo. So the press is getting on board. And the media is huge, and we can actually get our stories in. And this is true of this issue and every other issue out there. Don't believe the propaganda about the media is all controlled and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not true. All right, now, let us go back to this. So this news media, tiered media, is putting huge pressure on the truth embargo. All right? And now we've got the witness emergence. Now, this is very important. As I mentioned before, when the Cold War ends, the witnesses start coming forward. And I could have done 5 or 6 pages like this, all right? Just to give you a quick sampler here, a little hors d'oeuvre sampler here. Here we have John Callahan, who was the FAA administrator on duty when the Japan Airlines sighting event took place. He gathered up all the documents, and they forgot to take them from him, so when he left, he took them with him. And he became a witness at the Witness Project, Disclosure Project. This is Nick Pope, who's now on TV all the time because he used to work on the UFO desk at MOD in the UK. He's level-headed, he's grounded, he looks good in clothes, and so he's getting all the media, and he is making a lot of progress. He's really helping us along because he is getting so much media attention. This is Richard Haynes, career man at NASA, who built the largest database of pilot sightings in the world, now well above 4,000. It's now in the hands of ICAR, which deals with, is it ICAR, ICAP? Oh, boy, I keep forgetting that. Anyway, this pilot's database is incredible evidence. And he amassed that over many years, and he has come forward to talk about that from time to time. This is the Corrado Balducci, who was told about the issue, got interested, and in retirement started speaking out, and in fact traveling and talking about how the Catholic Church was quite comfortable with extraterrestrials. It was informal, supposedly personal, no chance he was doing this without the approval of the Vatican. Or if the Vatican had wanted to stop him, they would have. This is Robert Salas. He was the commander of the Malmstrom Air Force Base SAC, Malmstrom Air Force Base SAC site, missile site, when a saucer came down in 1967 and turned off all the missiles and created quite a hubbub. He has come forward. Other members of that team that night have been starting to emerge. And this is Robert Jacobs right here. I'm losing my... Okay, I think I'm losing my power on this thing. It's starting to fade. You got that back up?
Yeah.
Robert Jacobs is... it's going fast. Is right there under the W. He was a...
Just only press this one. It's the remote for it.
Gotcha. Okay. Where's this one? That's the...
Yeah, I got it one better.
Okay. Oh, that's good. He was part of an Air Force camera crew that filmed the launch of a dummy ICBM with warhead. In other words, a dummy warhead. All right. And they filmed it using high, end cameras, literally all the way up into great heights. He couldn't see what was going on, but the camera was designed to track it. When they went and viewed the film, what they saw was a saucer came in and started. This missile is traveling 6,000 to 7,000 miles an hour. It comes in and starts just kind of cruising around, the missile, just doing little circles around it, and then it shoots a beam and knocks the warhead off the top of the missile. That was pretty exciting. So he got called in by the command and said, "Were you messing with the film?" He says, No, he didn't say anything. And they said, "Okay." Then the intelligence guys came in, took the film, never to be seen again, and told him, "Never talk about this as long as you live." The standard kind of thing. These are the kinds of witnesses that are coming forward. This is creating a huge problem. Now, what's happened since 96 forward is that the advocacy movement, as it developed, started to work directly with these witnesses. And probably the best example of this, first, let me mention two very important witnesses. I forgot. This is a gentleman who came forward. He would be a classic witness. This is Gordon Cooper, the Mercury 7 astronaut, one of the first men into space, the greatest pilot that ever lived, featured in The Right Stuff, the book and the movie. In the 70s, he started to come forward and say, look, this ET thing is real. He had seen some things while a pilot. He had seen something land in an Air Force base while he was there, saw some of the film that was taken of that landing, which was taken away and never seen again. And he continued to do that right up until he started to lose his ability because of Parkinson's and dropped out. But he gave it a good shot. And this is, of course, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who is still out in front, 2 cancers and a heart attack later, 10 years following the footsteps of Gordon Cooper, calling for the release of the UFO documents and indicating that the ET presence is real. He has a PhD in astronomics from MIT, and of course he was the 6th man to walk on the moon. Again, this thing goes back a long ways. Just to give you an example, this is July of 1978. And this meeting was called by Sir Edward Gary, the Prime Minister of Grenada, because he was very interested in UFOs. And so he called a meeting because that's what has to happen if something is going to go on at the UN. A head of state or their representatives must call a meeting or initiate it. The UN doesn't initiate these things. And so we have a meeting about the UFO issue in 1978 with the UN Secretary General Kurt Waldheim. Now here is Gordon Cooper. Right? A young Gordon Cooper. Here's Dr. Jacques Vallée. This is Claude Poher, remember his name. And that, of course, is the legendary J. Allen Hynek. And these are some other gentlemen addressing the issue in 1978. Nice try, but nothing was going to come from that. It was 13 years before the Cold War was going to be over. There was no way this was going to go forward. As for Edgar Gary, what can I say? About 6 months later, when he returned to the UN, to further pursue the issue, he was thrown out of the government in a coup. And then about 1.5 years or 2 years later, we invaded Grenada. So what can I say, okay? It has been a tough road on this issue for everyone. Now, probably one of the most important projects working with witnesses was the Disclosure Project created by this man, Stephen Greer. And he also is the founder of CSETI. He got into this issue in depth in the very late 80s and has been a major player for 17 years. He spent about $100,000 in donated money. Oh, Lord, I wish I'd had that. And he went out and filmed 120 hours of interviews with 100 of those witnesses I was telling you about. He then condensed that to 4 hours of greatest hits and brought that to a press conference at the National Press Club on May the 9th, 2001. He brought 21 of the witnesses with him to give brief testimony. A friend of mine, Janet Donovan, who was a top independent public relations person, put this together and got 100 reporters there, as well as 17 camera crews from national and international press. In addition, there were 100 public there, the largest press conference ever held at the National Press Club. It was live streamed to the internet. Several 100,000 people tried to log on and crash their website. So you can see things are happening in May of 2001. I was standing right here off to the side. When the press conference was done, one of my contacts took the 4-hour tape and ran it straight up the street to Ted Koppel of ABC Nightline and delivered it to him personally and said, "You got to look at this. Look at these witnesses." We got a call that night from ABC saying, "We want to talk to about 6 of the witnesses. Give us your name and contact information." We did. And we saw the ball starting to roll. And the international press was also very interested. But history is fickle. And a very good lesson learned here, right? If you are dealing with major activism, you are at the mercy of fate and history. Nobody knew that better than Gandhi, who was doing very well. They were making extraordinary progress towards independence movement in India. When, of course, what happened? The war happened. And he had to back away. In fact, he backed away twice, right? Going away for several years. That's the way it is, which is why it's best to get things done now when you're talking about major historical issues and activism. So what happens, of course, is that 4 months and 2 days later, we have 9/11. That's the ball game. Everybody go home, take some nice parting gifts with you, but we're done here, all right? So Stephen Greer went off in other directions. I focused on the X conference, right, and running for office in 2002, but it hasn't gone away because on November the 12th, 2007, another group, the Coalition for Freedom of Information, and James Fox, the documentarist, who, by the way, just aired his brand new documentary, follow-up to Out of the Blue, called I Know What I Saw, on the 9th on the History Channel in the U.S. It's headed your way. It's on YouTube. It's up on torrents. You can get it. It's an important documentary, and James is emerging as the Ken Burns of this field. He borrowed money on advance of his documentary to bring in 12 international or witnesses dealing with international events, held another press conference at the National Press Club, got a pretty good turnout, November the 12th, this is about 6 years later. Got some coverage, reasonable news cycle, but then it stopped. There are reasons for that, but it did serve a purpose. It definitely put the media on notice. We're still here. We still got witnesses. And so it had an important effect. It didn't generate anything right away because of certain political realities in the United States. So, as you can see, this is a sense of the witness trajectory here. The truth embargo has got to sustain this. Colonel Corso's, Colonel Cooper's, Captain Mitchell's, generals, heads of the military like Admiral Lord Hill Norton, defense ministers like Paul Hellyer, right? This is tough to keep saying there's nothing going on when people are saying, yes, there is, of that rank and station. Okay, one last note. This gentleman moderated that press conference in November, and his name is Fife Symington. And what's remarkable about him is he did and J. Allen Hynek. And whenever somebody does that, they get extra points for me, no question. J. Allen Hynek was the investigator for the Air Force, sent out to look at the phenomena and show it was nothing to be concerned about. Once he saw enough of it, he realized it was true. He quit the job with the Air Force, left his, I think he had to leave his academic position, and founded CUFOS, Center for UFO Studies, completely reversing his position because it was true, and he knew it. This gentleman was the governor of Arizona in 1997, when the Phoenix Light events occurred, it was a big deal. This was a big event, one of the most important UFO events in history. And he was the governor, and he made a decision to try to make light of it, to calm people down. He had a press conference. He brought a staffer out with a huge alien costume on, and they had a big joke. Well, it didn't go over that well. The story grew for various reasons, and ironically, he was under indictment for some real estate deals that were probably a little off, though he's a pretty good guy. He's a fine guy. He ended up losing his governorship, being convicted of that, and was on his way to prison when Bill Clinton pardoned him. Okay, so he goes off to start a new life with his wife and his 4 kids, and builds a very fine life, doing great things. And 10 years later, James Fox comes to interview him for the update to Out of the Blue, which is what we have over here. All right, and he completely shocks James by saying and doing a 180, like Hynek. He says, "Look, I'm sorry about that press conference. I'm an former Air Force pilot. And I happened to be out that night when the initial triangle flew over Arizona. I saw it fly right over my head, okay? The thing was, 5, 6 football fields across, moving 20 miles an hour. It clearly had to be extraterrestrial." Whoa. This is not the kind of thing you do if you're trying to re-emerge in the public light after 10 years being forced out of the governorship. I admire this man greatly. So he moderated this panel. Okay. By the way, before I go on further, because I just remembered it, I forgot to tell you before, none of these discs are are copy protected, all right? So feel free to if you buy any, to make copies of them, give them to your friends, spread the word, no problem. That includes, I think Out of the Blue is not copy protected either. All right, now, here are the people that appeared at that November 7th press conference. In addition to Fife Symington, who, the former governor, they brought in Wilfred de Brouwer, the Major General in Belgium, to talk about the famous Belgian Triangle sightings, all right? Claude Poher, remember Claude, 1978 at the UN? He comes in to talk about the issue. He is a member of the French Space Agency, right? 28 years later, Claude still trying to make something happen. Good for him. Jean-Charles Dubac, an Air France captain with a fairly significant sighting. He is there, by the way. Jean-Charles is the head of Exopolitics France. Dr. Jean-Claude Reeves, an astrophysicist, radio astronomer with the Paris Observatory. He was there. And General Parviz Jafari, who, when he wasn't a general... Oh, isn't that cute? That's not the CIA. Okay? I love it. This could get interesting. Let's see where this goes. Okay, he was a pilot, an Iranian pilot, sent up to intercept the UFO in a very famous case. Totally tracked on radar, the whole 9 yards. He gets up close to it. I think they were probably going to try to shoot it down. The UFO just turns off all of his power. He's plummeting to Earth. Power comes on. No problem. Message sent. However, well, he came forward now as a general to talk about that. Rodrigo Bravo Garrido, again a Chilean army captain and pilot. And then we have Oscar Alfonso, I love this name, Oscar Alfonso Santa Maria Huertas. With a name like that, you don't need an education. You just waltz through life, okay? Peruvian Air Force commander, Anthony Choi, Peruvian Air Force, with the Air Force as a civilian member of the running the Air Anomalous or Anomalous Air Phenomena Investigations.